Evening, everyone. My name's Wayne, and I'm an alcoholic. And thank you ever so much for having me, and thank you for sponsoring me, Bob. My sobriety date is the 11th of July, 1988, and thank you. That's when I took the steps, and I've been trying to practice the principles ever since. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. That's just the way it's been. And my home group is the Road to Recovery group in Plymouth, England. It's like a holding pen for the Jerry Springer show. The level of sickness is truly remarkable. Makes me a very proud man. I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous obviously a while ago now, and just desperately unhappy, and I could see no way of living comfortable without alcohol. I mean, alcohol was just that obsession with alcohol. I was uncomfortable sober. I preferred being drunk. I preferred seeing life through a drunken haze, just one step removed from everybody else, something between me and other people. Alcohol just seemed to take those rough edges off life. Life was more comfortable. I was more at ease with drunk. I preferred being drunk. And, I lived in a bedsit, and that sounds quite romantic, but it was just an awful place with a shower in the corner, and a car would drive down outside, and I would just jump out of my skin. Somebody would ring the doorbell downstairs, and my knees would physically knock together. Occasionally somebody would let them in downstairs, and they'd walk up the stairs, and they would knock on the glass front door, and I would be just so, it was just awful. And the only thing that ever made it okay was the sense of ease and comfort, which comes instantly by taking a few drinks. Just the crack of a bottle of vodka or a ping of a can of Supertenants, and I'd feel instantly at ease. I could be the person that I always thought I should be. Life was more bearable. When I was sober, I'd be walking down the road, and I'd be walking funny because I thought everybody was looking at me. Life was difficult. It was painful, but a few drinks and everything was okay. Unfortunately, I would do things that I deeply regretted, and I would promise I will never, ever do it again. But I always eventually did. And I would say I would promise, and I would humiliate myself, I would humiliate other people, and I just seemed to I could not live a life sober. I could envisage no way of being free of alcohol in being in this world. It just seemed completely alien to me. And I remember one particular night I was sat in a subway in an underpass drinking, and all my friends had gone home. And I just remember thinking, if only I could feel like this all of the time. And it dawned on me that night that all I had to do was drink all of the time. And the next morning, I started taking a quarter bottle of vodka to work, and the quarter bottle of vodka went to half a bottle of vodka, and eventually I started losing jobs on a very regular basis. And I was a ladies' hairdresser at the time, and it was a disaster. It really was. It culminated in there was one particular night we were doing a hair show, and it was a bit like this. It was a big posh hair show, lots of people, and everybody that meant anything to me was sat in the front row. Oh dear God! Anyway, the show started with as many people there as there were here tonight, and I was on the stage, and I was spitting at everybody. I was sticking up two fingers, and I basically got thrown out. And when I got outside, I tried to push my dad in front of a bus. I had a fight with him in the car park. They eventually took me home. My parents were in the front of the car, and I was in the back with my girlfriend. And we were driving along the freeway, the motorway, and I saw the lights of a building ahead of me. And as we got closer, I realised it was a bar, and I needed another drink. And he wouldn't stop. So I just leant forward and I started strangling him in the car. Alcohol, I was becoming dangerously antisocial. Life wasn't going well. I mean, those are the early days when I used to love everybody. I would have a drink, and I would just, go to my mate Skinhead Ken, say, "Oh, I love you, bro," and he'd say, "I love you too, bro." Those days were gone. It was not like that anymore. I was that leery one that you wanted to keep a wide berth around. I mean, I just wanted to punch people. I was angry. I just couldn't speak to people. And life was difficult, and you wanted to keep away from me. I remember, let's say, I did this awful bedsit, and I had this plan. What if I should have a drinks cabinet? All I've got to do, because I remember in the 70s, my parents and everybody, they used to have these fancy drinks cabinets. And I thought, if my attic room, and I'd have my own drinks cabinet. All I've got to do is I'll save a can a night, or I'll save a little bit of a bottle, and eventually I'll have a really good drinks cabinet. And it'd just be sophisticated. It would be good. I could never get past one can. I just couldn't seem to do it. And it wasn't like I didn't try to stop drinking or stop trying to control my behaviour. I tried doctors, I tried counsellors, I tried treatment facilities. I remember going to the doctor, and the doctor said to me, he said, "Wayne, just look out that window. What do you see?" I said, "I see a park bench." And he said, "Exactly. There are no alcoholics in Plymouth." That's the posh area of Plymouth. And okay. And I went to the Alcohol Advisory Centre. And they said to me, "Right, okay, put 3 coins in your pocket. And every time you have a drink, take out a coin. When there are no coins left, just stop." I'm like, God. I would just get my change mixed up. I was getting nowhere. And eventually, I went into a treatment facility. I went in there, a 22-year-old miserable, suicidal alcoholic. And a few weeks later, I emerged a 22-year-old, miserable, suicidal amateur psychiatrist. And I started going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I made a fatal mistake. I did what I saw the people around me doing. And I went to lots of meetings, and I spoke at every single one, and I moaned, and I whined, and I blamed the world for everything that was happening in my life. And I got absolutely nowhere. Sometimes I would speak, and I would say, after the meeting, I'm going to jump off the bridge. And I would conjure up a tear. And people would come up to me after the meeting. They'd say, "Oh, Wayne, that was a great share. That was gut-level honesty." And I thought, yeah, I thought it was, But I just get back to my bedsit, and I'd just be pacing around like a caged tiger, just wanting to die. And I remember one night, I went 11 weeks after this treatment facility. After the meeting, I come home, and I had a bottle of vodka. And I was sat there for, a bit of time. I was thinking, well, I'm not really as bad as those other people at the meeting. The first one, he drinks a bottle of whiskey, killed somebody. The second one drank 2 bottles of whiskey, killed 2 people, and so on and so on. I'd be thrown away 11 weeks. I can't drink. 11 weeks. And then all of a sudden, I started thinking, well, hang on a minute. I feel really comfortable. I feel like ease. There's a bottle of vodka right there. Surely if I was like those other people at the meeting, there's no way I'd be able to sit here as comfortable as I do. I can't be an alcoholic. So I took a drink. That's. And I was a bad example of Alcoholics Anonymous. My best mate at the time was called American Jim. And I remember we were walking down the road, and he said to me, he said, "Look, Wayne," he said, "my sponsors told me to keep away from you because you're a bad example." And I thought, what? And I was. I really was not doing very well. I got drunk pretty much every week. And one night, I left my home group, and I was drinking in one of these telephone boxes, one of those red things with the windows. And I was sat there, and the meeting might have been fine, I can't remember, but I got really unlucky. That night, 2 of the lads from the meeting turned up to use the phone, and they were parked right outside. I thought, oh God, what am I going to do now? And they, as you do, they pop their head in and say hello, and the only enthusiastic thing that I could think to say was, can I still be the treasurer? That was it. But if you think that that's funny, they said yes. Those were the types of meetings I was attending. There was absolutely no expectations of me. There was no accountability. I could do what I wanted, when I wanted, and that was it. And the truth is, if you're like me, it's possible to sit in the middle of the best group in the world. It's possible to come to the State Line Retreat every year for decades. But if I do not take the 12 steps, my life will get progressively and systematically worse over a prolonged period. I need to take the steps. And that was a blow. And shortly after, I met the people that they warned me about. I went to the wrong meeting. It was the same venue on a different night. I went there by mistake. But they warned me about these people. These people, they were the Joy Boys, the God Squad. They were the Magic Circle, the Magnificent Seven. They were the roadies. Keep away from them. But these guys were different. These guys had a purpose. They had direction. They spoke with conviction. They were enthusiastic. They were enjoying Alcoholics Anonymous. They could see life without alcohol. And I wanted and needed what they had. And the thing is, they were not going to take my crap. They were not going to allow the sickness to take over the meeting. And one of the things they had that was different, which I really didn't like, was that they had a meeting etiquette. There were things that were expected of me. And, from being somebody that would speak at every meeting, moaning, all of a sudden they told me if I was going to stand this side of the meeting, if I was going to speak at a meeting, if I was going to be the secretary of a meeting, I should smarten up and I should maybe put on a shirt and tie. And I didn't like that one bit. But I needed what they had, and I wanted what they had more than anything else. So I went out to find myself an AA suit. Now, I went everywhere. I had spiky hair, I had big boots, I spat every 20 yards, I effed in blind every other word. So it really wasn't me. But eventually, after going to all these charity shops, I found a brilliant suit. It was fantastic. But it must have belonged to a short, fat bloke, because I had to wear braces, and the trousers sat beautifully above my 14-hole Doc Martens. But I loved that suit. I absolutely loved it. And I wore it everywhere. For years, I wore that suit. Everywhere. And can I tell you something really interesting? I'm becoming that short, fat bloke. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous does for you. And so, anyway, so all this nonsense that they come out with, for me to accept that, I needed to be sponsored. I needed a sponsor. I didn't need a sponsor. I needed sponsoring. That's completely different. And I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I am an absolutely terrible judge of sponsors. My first sponsor took me shoplifting. And the rest have hated me ever since. I just don't get it. They never listen. They just do not listen to a word I say, and they give me stupid advice to do. I remember this, my first long-term sponsor. And, I would ring him up and I would say, oh my God, it's happened again. And he would say, well, bless you, lad, that's a deeply moving story. Have you read your big book today? You what? I'd ring him up the next day and he said, well, bless you, lad, your stories touched me deeply. Go and work with a newcomer. And I thought, my God, this guy just doesn't care how I feel. He just, I'm telling him the problem is over here. And yet he's giving me action over there. It's irrelevant to the problem. But I took those actions, and rapidly I went from that place of despair, in that emotional turmoil and that inner conflict, to a place of comfort, to a place where I could see that I could actually live sober and enjoy sobriety. And I remember the day when I really did do something bad. It was, oh my God, how's this going to go? It was bad enough with the other stuff, but this is going to be terrible. And I remember ringing him up, I said, oh my God, this is what happened. And I remember the words that came down the phone. It says, "Bless you, lad. If you're honest with me, I'm on your side. And that's the deal I make with people I sponsor. If you're honest with me, I'm on your side." And eventually, he died. He died sober, walking to his meeting. He had a heart attack. And one of my sponsees had just come back from the World Convention. And he came back with three things. He came back with some tapes. He came back with a new sign for the meeting. It said, "You are no longer alone," and an American girlfriend. And yeah. So anyway, he said, "Listen, you got to listen to these tapes." But before I go on to, I hate AA tapes. I don't listen to AA. I've listened to a few over the years, but I don't really like. I don't listen to them. But he said, "Listen to these tapes." But before I go into that, so I knew I was coming here, so I thought I better listen to some Bob. I need to listen to some Bob. So I'm scrolling through all these toys. There's loads of them. I thought, great, there's loads of them. And I didn't have my glasses on. And all of a sudden I thought, that one looks good. It said 11 minutes. 3 days later, I'm on the second line of step 6, you know. So anyway, so this sponsor, he gives me these tapes. And he says, if you don't want to listen to any of these tapes, just listen to this one old guy. I thought, okay. So I listened to this share, and I couldn't believe it. I could not believe my ears. There was this guy, the other side of the world, in his area. He was called a dictator-type sponsor, and he had a group of AA stormtroopers in Los Angeles. And I thought, wow. I was already being called a dictator-type sponsor, and I had a gang of spiritual hooligans. I thought, I've just got to call this guy. And I remember calling him. And I explained to him what my sponsor meant, and he died. And he said, "Well, kid," he says, "everybody needs somebody like that in their life, and I will perform that role." And the phone went dead. I called him back 3 times before I realised what was going on. But I was calling this guy every week, and I didn't even know what he looked like. I called him every week, emailed him every week for 6 months. And one day, he was in England, and somebody said, "There he is over there, look. He's on his way." Okay. So I was waiting for my moment, you know, and I stood there, and he was walking, and I said, "Hi, I'm Wayne. I'm Wayne. You sponsor me." And he just looked me in the eye, he put 2 hands on my head, and said, "You'll never drink again, kid." And off he went. That was the end of that. Now, I'd have been forgiven. See, I wouldn't put up with that crap. You know, I will break no control from man or God. I will try and protect my inner integrity until my dying breath. I'm not going to put up with that nonsense from anyone. But by the time I'd got to my seat, which was no further than over there away, I'd processed what had happened in my mind. There's perhaps not another living soul in the world right now that I will listen to. This is working for me. I do not need to be frivolous and pally-pally with my sponsor. I just need to listen to my sponsor. So for the first time in my adult life, I shut up. And if there are any new people here tonight, there's a word for that. There's a name for it at least. And that name is Step 1. And because all that ever happened with me, if you're like me, you're probably the same, is that somebody would say something that I didn't like. And resentment and fear would jump to the defense of my ego, and it kept my life in a perpetual cycle of insanity. And I kept going down and down and around and around. And just doing things different just seemed to change it. And I've got this story about sponsorship. I mean, to me, it sums up sponsorship beautifully. I mean, it's actually got nothing to do with sponsorship, but to me, it's everything to do with sponsorship. And you can see it, it's in the history books. You know, Bill W. was in the AA clubhouse in New York, and Lois was away. And he said, I could hear the rain coming down on the old tin roof. I mean, I've got this wonderful romantic image of what that looked like. And you've got this old 1930s New York clubhouse with neon lights reflecting in the puddles. I mean, it's just a wonderful image. Probably nothing like that. But in my mind, that's what it was like. Anyway, he's in there and he says, the janitor knocked on the door and he said, look, Bill, I've got another one's just turned up from New York. It's somewhere else. Do you want me to send him away? And Bill says, no, let him in. Send him up. And he says he could hear this guy coming down the hallway. And he said he was struggling. He was laboring. He was in a bad way. This guy, he sounded really off. He sounded in terrible condition. And he knocked on the door. He opened the door. And Bill let this guy in. He had a black coat on, a hat and a scarf. He took his scarf off and he saw a clerical collar. Now, that guy was Father Ed Dowling, who became Bill's spiritual sponsor. But Father Ed, it's well documented, he suffered terribly with arthritis. He was a man who was in a lot of physical pain. And Bill said, there was a presence. There was something about this guy. There was a presence there. But anyway, Father Ed Dowling was in New York. And he says he was watching people ice skating. And they were gliding across the ice with so much grace that they made me feel like I could do the same. That is sponsorship. When I didn't think that I could have what you people had, when I didn't think that I was good enough or I was clever enough, my sponsor made me feel like I could do the same, that I could do this and I could have this. He wanted more for me than I ever realized that was possible. And because when I don't allow myself to be sponsored, the one time I'm going to let you know, the one time in 37 years that I didn't listen, it goes something like this. I go, you all right? I've met a woman. Don't do it, kid, keep away. The people who love you will hate it, and the people who hate you will love it. Just don't do it, a world of pain. And I think, well, all right, thanks. But that can't be right. I'm going to take this straight to God. So I go home and I said, God, if you don't want me to see this woman, just give me a sign. And all of a sudden, the pictures on the wall are spinning around and the windows are coming and there's the chandelier and there's big cracks and it goes quiet. Just any old sign. But the problem when I live like that, it's like being sponsored by a magic mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the greatest of them all? And that broad, bright highway that I hop, skipped and danced along becomes narrower and narrower and darker until the only thing you see is the glow-in-the-dark AA ejector cord. Just get me out of here. I don't want people to see me like this. We try to live by structure and not emotion. And I call my sponsor. He said, yep, you're in the shit, kid. Just get up. 2 steps to the left. 4 steps forward. Call me next week. So you get up 2 steps to the left, 5 steps forward. You bang your head and you see that glow-in-the-dark run cord. It's still there. And you hear people on the outside of the tunnel shouting in stupid advice. Buy a pair of skinny jeans. There's plenty of fish in the sea. And they just don't understand. You call your sponsor again and he says, yep, you're getting there. Just veer around to the right, keep your head down, call me next week. And slowly, by taking the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, things start to brighten up. But you learn a truth, that whether you are new here for the first time, or whether you've been coming for a long time and things ain't going so well, nothing gets better with time. Time alone changes nothing for somebody like me. It's dependent on what I do with that time. I have to take the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, when the white winds blow and the snows fall, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. So just keep coming to my home group, keep taking those actions. And, and again, Bill Wilson is just an absolutely... He's just a great example of somebody that just took the actions. I mean, he come home from another hard day's work, and he sat there, and he was pissed off. I mean, he actually says, I was sore. He actually uses the phrase, I was in far from spiritual mood. Now just think about that. I'm in far from spiritual mood. I mean, I know people that don't even want to speak in a meeting when they're in far from spiritual mood, but half an hour later, Bill Wilson had wrote the 12 steps. That's pretty good going from somebody who's in far from spiritual mood. So it doesn't matter how I feel, I just have to take the actions regardless. And yes. So anyway, I've got an admiration for the military. I was never in the military, but I've got a huge admiration, and I love watching documentaries and reading articles on just amazing acts of heroism, courage. I mean, wow, how did they do that? And invariably, somewhere in the article, or they'll get asked, "How did you do that?" And they will almost always say, "We trusted in our training." And that's what we do here. When all hell breaks loose, when it feels like my AA world is falling apart, I just trust in my training. Those simple actions which brought me to that place of comfort in the beginning are the things which have saved me again and again and again. I've had for the last 35 years, I've been a photographer, and I had the great privilege of photographing I recognise him. I had the great privilege of photographing a famous member of the SAS. And I remember saying to him, I said, "Look, how important is your training?" And he said to me, repetition, repetition, repetition. It's only when we've mastered the basics that we are even in a position to make those life-saving and life-changing decisions. So I have to just keep taking the actions. And, but I mean, I'm 37 years sober. I'm 37 years sober. I know a bit. Why do I still need sponsoring after 37 years of sobriety? Why would I still need sponsoring? Well, I'm going to give you at least 2 good, invisible reasons why I need sponsoring. And if you're like me, maybe you're the same. But the first one is this. It says in the book, it says, there was always that strange mental phenomena that paralleled our sound reasoning. I got that strange mental phenomena paralleled with my sound reasoning. And it was almost as if it was constant. I was under constant attack. It's like, have a Guinness, that's healthy. Have a Newcastle Brown, that's good for you. Drink a Miller Lite. It was constant. I was being bombarded with all these stupid things. Have a shandy. Last night you had a bad can. This time it'd be different. I was bombarded with these thoughts of drinking. So it manifested itself as an obsession with alcohol. Again and again and again. When I took the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, what seemed to happen is that I placed a spiritual missile defense system in between those two things. And all I have to do is load and maintain that system. And, and the problem's been removed. And we hear it all the time. The problem's been removed. Alcohol is no longer a problem. I'm in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I'm absolutely fine. I'm never going to drink ever again. The thing is, in my experience, is that many alcoholics are like me, and what happens is I can get, sobriety can almost become the enemy, because I get comfortable. When I get comfortable, I can become complacent. And people can, I know it all. I've been here a long time. I know it all. I've done it all. I've seen it all. I know the concepts. I've been to conference. You can't tell me anything. I'm the finished article. Wow. And now the problem with that, and there is a problem with that, is when people who have been sober a while drink again, because we like to think that we can see the insidious insanity coming. I mean, I do. I hear it all the time. Betty's not been to a meeting for 2 weeks. This time next week she's going to drink again, or Boris has left AA and he's going to have an insidious insanity of the first drink and he's going to drink again. But none of us can see the insidious insanity of the first drink coming. That's why it's insidious. Okay, we don't see it coming. And this is how it goes when people who have been sober a while drink again. In the words of Clancy, it's like a thunderbolt out of the blue. And at that point, I've either been loading that spiritual defense system with inventory, with prayer, with working with others, with doing all those things that are inconvenient, and I will react sanely and normally, or I won't. At that point, it's too late. So that's one good reason why I need continued sponsorship. Because I tell you what, at our group, we've got, this is another reason. We've got one of these Facebook groups, these secret private groups, and every now and again we do a bit of business. I like to play the Ayatollah, and I'll be typing away, and I said, the GSR, stop walking around like Hitler, and the rest of you stop being so damn lazy. And I'm just about to press post, and I think, damn, somebody added my sponsor to that group. Damn. There's something invisibly, quietly in the background, reigning in my ego, appealing to my higher and better self. It was a couple of years ago. My sponsor Bob was in England, and I tell you what, this was fantastic. This was just incredible sponsorship. We sat there, and he said to me, he said, Wayne, you're not going to like this. And of course, on the inside, I'm thinking, come on, bring it on, give it your best. And he says, I want you to start going to one extra meeting a week outside of your home group. And I'm thinking, you what? My life is better than ever. Why the hell do I need to go to an extra meeting? I've got everything I need here. Why do I need to go to one of those other meetings where they all hate me? But I heard myself say, yeah, all right. Because I have that feeling of being sponsored. There's something in the background reigning in my ego. And what's the other thing? Oh, yeah. So this is my thought process. Okay? When my first sponsor died, I was about 10 years sober. And let's say David, he died. And I started thinking to myself, well, I'm 10 years sober now. Do I really need one of these sponsors that's going to tell me what to do? Do I really need a sponsor that's going to be on my case and get me doing stuff? I'm 10 years sober. What I can do, I'll get some local chap, and if he wants, he can pop over, we can sit in the garden, I might be able to help him. I might be able to give him some advice on his group. I could do something like that, I think, Wayne, that ain't going to work for you. So I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, and I asked Clancy. When I was 30 years sober, Clancy died. And I start thinking, I'm 30 years sober now. Do I really need one of these sponsors that's going to keep being mean to me and just keep getting me to do things? Surely I know enough now. What I can do, but at this point, the group back home, they've got expectations, so I've got to do. So I've got to work this out properly. And I think what I could do, I'll just find a nice American. It might take a while, but probably have to go to Texas or somewhere. But eventually I'll find a nice American. And what I can do, and the beauty of it is, if they want a little holiday, they can just fly over and we can sit in the garden. We can have a little chat, and I might be able to help them with their group. No, Wayne. Look, Wayne, you're a really good copier, but you're a bad interpreter. You need sponsorship. You need somebody to tell you. You can't follow your own advice. You need a sponsor. So I jumped from the bloody fire into the volcano, and I asked Bob, and he's the muppet that sent me to that extra meeting. Geez. I went to a place called Totnes. It was full of hippies. It's worse than San Francisco. It was unbelievable. But But those are the reasons I need continued sponsorship. But the other thing was I needed a higher power in my life, and that was problematic for me. I mean, having a higher power was problematic because I didn't like your green. I didn't like the way God was peddled. I mean, God was peddled in a way which just made me want to throw up. I mean, I didn't like your green and your blue felt banners in the churches with your Jesus loves you and your tambourines and your placards with the end of the world is nigh. I mean, I just hated it. I just didn't like it. But I needed to find some kind of higher power. I needed to be willing to believe in something. Because when I got here, I mean, there were people talking about they were describing sudden and spectacular upheavals in even the others. They were talking about the same thing, but it happened more slowly over a period of time. And it seemed, this is how drastic it seemed. To me, it seemed this drastic. It's like, if you imagine, you go out to your backyard and you sat there on the doorstep, you're having a smoke and you're looking out at your backyard. And it's just a complete and utter mess. You know, there's twisted metal and glass. It's just it's like a scrapyard. And that was symbolic of my life. But then it's like they went to bed. They come down the next day. Overnight there was a storm. And they light up the fag. You're looking outside, and wow, all the rubbish was gone, and it was replaced with a perfectly beautiful Boeing 747. That's how drastic the change in the lives of the people around me seemed. That's what they said. Even the people who had an experience that took a bit of time were describing the same thing. They were describing something that drastic. And so I needed that change, but I didn't believe I could have it. So at this point, I mean, I need all the people, all the intellectually self-sufficient grown-ups to just look away now. Because the book says that in our personal stories, that each individual describes in their own language, from their own point of view, how they establish their relationship with God. And what worked for me was, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous has been so kind to me. I've had such a good life. It's worked so incredibly, but I needed to find that willingness. And I know that there are people here exactly like me. Not all of you, but there will be some. And it says, you know, so even Bill, I mean, if you notice, I can't remember what page, page 10 or something in his story, he was almost embarrassed of having a higher power. He was embarrassed of believing in God. And he talks about his intellectual heroes. He talks about the astronomers, the chemists, the evolutionists. Come on, Bill. I mean, they were not my heroes. I mean, Sid Vicious was my hero. I mean, I didn't want to know about astronomers, evolution, all that other stuff. I mean, that would not have reached me. But I needed heroes. I needed a reason. I needed something to help me believe, just to make that first step. And so here's one hero which really helped me. There was a guy called Desmond Doss, an incredible guy. He was the first person to win the Congressional Medal of Honor without carrying a weapon. And he was a conscientious objector. And he went off to war. And all the rest of the soldiers, they shunned him. He was a coward. I don't want anything to do with you. And this story is summed up wonderful in a film. I can't remember the name of the film, but it's summed up brilliantly. And they went off to war, and they climbed up this big cliff, and they went off into battle, and it was just awful. But Desmond, he climbed up, and he made his way to the front, and he would find wounded soldiers, and he would patch them up, and he would carry them back, and he would lower them down the cliff. And the next morning, they found there was like 75 of these guys laid out, and all those people that shunned him were there. And this is how it's portrayed in the film, but it's incredible. They refused to go back into battle until Desmond had finished his morning prayers. And there's a great scene in the film. in Desmond is praying, he says, Lord, please just give me one more. Lord, please just give me one more. Now that is a transferable skill. I can do that. I don't even have to get dirty. Lord, just give me one more day. Just give me one more day. Lord, just give me one more newcomer. Just give me one more. I can do that. That is a transferable skill. It talks in the book, it says about the verdict of the ages. That I think is a great line, but I think it's very underused. The verdict means pronouncement of truth. So the verdict of the ages is important. Verdict. You have a court case. You might have a week of evidence from the prosecution. You'll have a week of evidence from the defence, and then everybody is waiting on tenterhooks for the verdict, the pronouncement of truth. So the verdict is important. So I didn't like the way God was peddled now. So I went back through the ages to a time when a life of service and piety meant something completely different. It wasn't for wimps and saps the way it was today, the way the things that put me off. It meant something completely different. I went all the way back to the days of the warrior monks, and they would pray the non nobis before charging into battle. Non nobis domine, non nobis, sed nomine tua de gloriam, and they would charge, and that appealed to me. I loved that. That was little boy stuff. I grew up with that. I could have that. That was good for me. Some people didn't like that at my group. So I doubled down. I come forward a few hundred years to Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote a play about Henry V, England's greatest warrior king. And he was at the Battle of Agincourt. And the English were outnumbered tremendously. They faced certain death. They faced annihilation. But they prayed. I'm sure the French prayed as well, but they prayed. And miraculously, they won. And afterwards, there's a scene again where they are praying the non nobis. Not in thy name, O Lord, not in thy name, but to thee be the glory. It says in the book about, it often seems impossible to get rid of self without his help. And that's what I need to do. And I know there will be people here that are going to be finicky and point out that they then executed all the French prisoners. But you have to start somewhere. That's the point. You have to. That's the whole point. You have to start somewhere. There are two lads from our group here, and one of them is French. He follows me everywhere. He's just waiting. He's waiting for his move. But, one more thing. I find this. I'm talking to have this wonderful gift of sobriety that is on offer in Alcoholics Anonymous. I need you to find that willingness. So that's why I'm talking about this. And I only found this recently. And I was astonished. And I'm going to have to read a bit. But Bill talked about. He talks about Galileo. Galileo. I thought, well, he's just a clever bloke from a long time ago that had a telescope. That's the way I saw it. He saw these amazing things. That's all it really meant to me. But then I looked into it a bit more, and I'm not going to read very much, just a line from. Because Galileo, clever guy of his time. But he didn't have very many contemporaries. There were not very many people he could speak to. You know what I mean? It was nobody on his level. But there was one person that he did speak to. A man called Johannes Kepler. They never met, but they spoke. In their correspondence between the two is 100% we agnostics. Absolutely amazing. I was so excited when I saw this. But anyway, this is a line from Galileo to Kepler. It says, I give infinite thanks to God, who has been pleased to allow me to come to know such excellent and marvellous things. That's nice. We got some clever bloke that believes in God. That's nice. But Kepler's response to Galileo is truly, to me, absolutely remarkable when you put it into context. It says, I long to behold the things which you have seen, but even if I cannot yet with my own eyes, I see them with the eyes of my mind. Now, if you think, 400 years later, the best minds in the world today respected and revered Kepler so much that they named a telescope after him. and it discovered hundreds of planets with the potential for human life. And they called the first one the Kepler Eden. When you think of that, and then look at this again. I long to behold the things which you have seen, but even if I cannot yet with my own eyes, I see them with the eyes of my mind. And if you are new, even if you cannot yet see what is on offer for you, if you cannot see that this will work, just be willing to believe just be willing to believe in us. Be willing to believe in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you truly will find an absolutely remarkable life. I mean, when I took that third step, I seriously engaged in a lifetime of spiritual warfare with my own self as the enemy. And I think Marnie was talking about it the other night. And I took the first step and I asked God to build with me and to do with me as I willed. He said, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. And it takes me back to a story from when I was a kid. I mean, I was a young lad in England. I mean, you don't. I don't think you get this here. But on November the 5th every year, it's called Bonfire Night. We celebrate Guy Fawkes Night. So all the housing estates, they build a massive great bonfire. And for months leading up to Bonfire Night, all the kids are walking around the houses, knocking on the doors, trying to collect wood, and they're carrying big sofas on their head, you make a den in the bonfire, and you stand guard because you're pinching wood from the other bonfires, and you're knocking their bonfires down, and sometimes they'll burn your bonfire down. Which is always a bit risky when you've got a den inside and somebody guarding it. But one night, it was November the 4th. I was coming home from judo with my parents. And it must have been about 10 o'clock at night. And our bonfire was just on fire. Oh, no, it was too late. They'd done us. But early the next morning, the crack of dawn, I was up at the bonfire, rooting around. The only thing I managed to do was to get the centre pole back up. Now, if you don't know what the centre pole is the biggest, longest pole in the middle. And you dig a hole in the ground, you put some rocks in, and you get some bits of wood down the bottom to stand it up. And everything else is built around the centre pole. And I went off despondent. Went off to play football all afternoon. Got back about 5ish again with my dad. I couldn't believe it. The bonfire was bigger than what it was the night before. They'd been putting out requests on the radio. It was unbelievable. And one of my lackeys, one of my lieutenants, was on the top of the bonfire getting all the glory. But the thing that I learned from that is when it feels like my life has been burnt to the ground, and I take the third step, all I have to do is get the centre pole back up so that others and God have something to build around. And that is true if you are living in a sea of sickness and you're trying to start a group. And I know how difficult that is when people leave, and it's just so difficult. But I just have to get the centre pole back up so that others have something to build around. And I'm nearly finished. So, in every group, likely, all over the world, there's always an idiot in the corner. Okay? Now, I don't know who sat in the corners, but I'm not talking about you, okay? There's always that person where somebody, this group would be so much better if he wasn't here. Why does he keep coming? What's the point? You don't like, just go. It'd just be so much better without you. Then one day you're speaking at this other meeting and you start sharing and they all piling in and they attack you. You don't need a sponsor, you don't have to take the steps. And your head sinks, oh my God. And then all of a sudden you hear the idiot in the corner. And oh my God, they're here as well. It can't get any worse. But they've got your back. They're on your side. They're on the same page as you. You think, a few weeks, they're not so bad. They're they're all right, really. But quickly back to normal. It doesn't last long, you know. And then one day you're on the way to your meeting and you run out of fuel. Oh, God, you call one of your mates on the judgment committee and they say, I'll send someone along, get some fuel. And yet, you know, it's the idiot turns up, the only one available with the fuel. But what I'm trying to say is that by just practicing the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous as best as we can, eventually that idiot in the corner becomes our brother from the other side of the room. That's what happens here. And, it says, if I fail to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, I would not survive the certain trials and those spots ahead. If I did not work, I would surely drink. Well, we all know what self-sacrifice is. It's extremely inconvenient. It's stuff I don't want to do. But for me, where the work really matters, where it really counts, and where it's really so difficult, is when I'm in a place where there are people who are different than me. When I'm in a place where there are people with different political views, people with different religious views, people who are popular, people who are dull, people who are mean, people who are nice. When I'm in a place where there are people who are different than me, am I able to be patient, kind, tolerant, loving and understanding? Am I able to be just a little bit more generous in my judgment of other people? And fortunately, for somebody like me, there is one special place in the world where flawed and imperfect alcoholics gather to at least begin to practice those spiritual principles. And tonight, that place is called the State Line Retreat in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you.